recent survey from Deloitte of 100 senior executives from U.S. grocery retailers with more than 10,000 employees offered some interesting revelations. The insights of these executives from the report, The Future of Grocery Retail, include 87% saying the marketing of groceries will become hyper-personalized, 40% expected to see store-managed food production within a decade, and the ever-increasing role technology will have on how consumers buy groceries. Joining us to discuss the report and the future of grocery retailing is Adam Almond, a principal at Deloitte Consulting. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Greg.
We're excited to have you and to kind of take a deeper dive into what these executives are thinking and obviously how we'll continue to see grocery and how consumers buy groceries continue to evolve as we move it further into the 2020s as it is, which is always odd to say that, but that's where we are in the 2020s, so always interesting times. Adam, as we start, can you just really start by giving us, when we talk about the future of grocery, but give us kind of the current state of where grocery is right now?
I agree. It's always important to understand, where you've been before diving into where you think things may be going. So, grocery in the U.S. has really evolved from small regional independent model into large national chains carrying more products and really serving more consumers. Just personal example, I grew up in a small town, and my grandfather had the local grocery store. Actually, the photo that's right behind me here. And that model largely doesn't exist anymore, even in smaller rural communities. And as larger national chains scaled largely by serving an average consumer, and they really chasing that bell curve when consumers looked more alike, they were more uniform. There was very little detailed data available to work with. It was largely a cash-paying consumer. And those are some of the things that we dig into with the future of grocery is around consumers becoming more distinct with who they are, and grocery industry driving into those considerations, and an overall paradigm shift from kind of serving the mass to becoming more micro and hyper-personalized.
When we use the word grocery today, are we talking about what we would consider and think about the traditional supermarket? Or is it any retailer right now that is selling really food and different types of groceries?
Yeah, we're really talking about all types of grocery. Our survey didn't dissect traditional grocery versus maybe more convenience or mass. It really was just 100 executives from retailers who serve groceries or have food, and over 10,000 employees.
So I touched on a couple of the notable findings in the report. But as you and your team at Deloitte were reviewing the findings and reviewing the results, were there a couple of items in there that kind of gave you pause, the make you go moments in the report?
Yeah, I'd say the first one I touched on a little bit is just consumers have increasingly diverse and advanced technology proliferation in the grocery aisle. And the grocery industry is really shifting the strategy and creating unique experiences around that. The specific stat is 87% of the executives we surveyed said that marketing of groceries will become hyper personalized, and they're specifically working on roadmaps to do that. A second finding is really around those changing consumer demands and really new competitive pressure. And so retail is really poised to push some of those maybe perhaps traditional bounds on what lane they're playing in and really what is their addressable market. One of the stats was that 92% of the executives think that private label will be a larger and much more growing source of revenue for them in the future. And really looking to see how those offerings can create not only differentiation, but also increased profitability. And then, I think the third point I would highlight is really no surprise, and it's around technology and really seeing technology and data proliferating in physical store experiences, but also impacting the worker in the store itself and those worker experiences. And so, checkout free, just walk out type technology is definitely something that has, been in the news a lot. And, over 2/3 of grocery executives said they expect to see new enabled experiences such as that not only changes the, consumer experience, but also the worker experience within the store.
Yeah, interesting. And kind of building off that, and obviously the changes that are forthcoming, the impact of the pandemic, which had obviously changed so many aspects of the lives that we just led for normal, seemingly for decades. Grocery was not immune to some of those significant changes, and a lot of those have carried forward. But as you sit here now and kind of look, at the future, maybe it's over the next decade, what do you see as some of the long-lasting effects of the pandemic on grocery shopping?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really around a continuation of this shift to digitizing the store experience. I would say that grocery in general was slower on that trajectory than many other consumer industries. And as you stated, that shift was accelerated during the pandemic. And that has, stuck around. Obviously there's, different kind of sub themes and plots around, consumer spending overall and inflation and the impact that's having. However, that overall kind of digitization of the store experience and being able to shop online is definitely something that is we don't see going away, both through our data and over the next 10 years. I think that some of the more recent trends, not in the survey specifically, but through our consumer spend tracking, is that we're seeing shifts such as customers trading down more often and growth in discount grocers versus declines in more premium grocers year over year. But I view those as more temporary shifts given the current economic factors and not some of those longer lasting results of the pandemic.
The results around sort of the hyper marketing and the more direct marketing to shoppers that a lot of the executives see forthcoming. Clearly, technology is going to have a massive role in that. And so that's sort of from where the grocer's reaching the shopper. But from the consumer standpoint, how is the technology now and how will it, based on some of the results, change how we all will buy groceries, in the coming years?
Yeah, I think one of the ways is that the kind of pervasiveness of that technology and what consumers have largely told us is the willingness to prioritize convenience, and technology has enabled grocers to invest in those capabilities, and that's ultimately giving time back to busy families and households, and that's had, I think, maybe a historically somewhat discounted value that is definitely we see being prioritized in the future, and that value proposition coming sometimes at the expense of assortment or price.
In the report, did you get a sense of when these executives talk about, how they're going to interact with their shoppers, technology being at the core of that, how they're going to, use technology in the future? Is it more theory right now and that the new technology has to be developed, or are some of them already doing that to further engage on a personal level with their shoppers?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think it is moving beyond theory, and there is still a lot of testing and learning being done in the space, and really around how the technology can create differentiation in some of the core capabilities that have always been there, and grocers have always done an excellent job on executing. But it's how can you do it more consistently at greater scale, more individualized, at a lower cost. And so those are the capabilities that new advances in technology are unlocking to be able to amplify many of those things that have really always been done. But how do you create strategic advantage and compete differently using those?
I think coming out of 2022 and then this year, there's been a lot of conversation of how consumers are shopping everywhere. There's not loyalty. They're looking for the best deals, and they may visit 6 or 7 different types of retailers for their food and their groceries on a monthly basis. Is there a role that technology can play to enhance that loyalty with shoppers?
Yes, I think that technology can definitely can and is playing a role in building that overall loyalty. I would say that that consumer data is largely viewed as an ability to, with the retailer, to really drive that frequency and that personalization around mass to micro. And so I'd say it's at the core of that strategy.
The report also touched on a couple other things. Society and culture was one, and that's sort of an interesting thing right now, as in the current day marketplace. Is I guess society's views on things, whether it's political, whether it's even economic, or we get into sustainability, as those topics kind of bubble up and are discussed broadly in society, what impact do you think, or maybe in the report, did the executives think this would have on how they sell groceries to consumers?
Yeah. So to your point, the report highlighted really a change in some of the linear milestones that drive a lot of consumer purchases. So traditional things that where you could kind of predict or expect certain consumer behavior, such as getting married or having kids, buying a home, it generally historically has been a linear progression where then certain consumer activity would happen afterwards. What we're seeing is that is becoming less predictable, so less linear. And so that the implication for grocery is that it not only impacts the buying, but also the retail workforce within grocery and in their expectations. So especially younger people, they're also seeking a purpose to embrace businesses not only where they shop, but also where they work, and businesses that have their same beliefs and values. And so, getting to specific examples, if you look at how a grocer organizes, a sell event or different occasions where they're, trying to drive traffic into the store, how they market and reach out to those consumers is definitely something that's going to need to evolve and change as society changes.
I guess one of the big issues too is climate change, which relates to sustainability. I look at that issue and think that's going to have a massive impact on how groceries are sold. Obviously, you're dealing with farming, you're dealing with trucking, you're dealing with so many aspects of it. Was there insight from the executives in terms of what impact climate change will have going forward on the grocery industry itself?
There was alignment that it was going to have an impact. I don't know that the report or the survey itself, identified exactly the responses around that. So, the report highlighted that 2023 in July was the hottest month the world's ever seen since recorded history. And I think as you pointed out, food is a product of the climate and environment, and so it's highly intertwined. The supply side and cost of food is that component's going to be inherently impacted grocery retailers as well. And so one of the things we explored on implications is grocers looking to continue to invest upstream and really around a surety of supply as say climate impacts the availability of many of these products. And so I say continuing to, because many are already doing this to some degree, but maybe in more niche areas. And so owning more manufacturing capacity, or even investing in perhaps growing operations. And so evaluating how they source and maybe contract with their suppliers differently, given the volatility of climate and the overall market, where say at one point, price may have been kind of the overall driver. Maybe it's something different, more related to the client, more related to the climate, or that assurity of supply. And so really looking to how can they minimize or eliminate certain variables in order to have more control over something that is inherently hard to control.
There were a lot of interesting results in this as I read through the report. One of the ones that jumped out at me, and I think it was the number and then how it's defined. But the study found that 40% of the executives that were surveyed feel there will be managed food production at their stores within the next decade. I mean, are we talking hydroponics and the growing of produce, or how are they defining food production?
Yeah, I think it is, it is part of that. Controlled environment agriculture, CEA, was referenced, along with other production that has value if scaled, more locally or regionally. And so we talked about the impact of climate and securing supply, and in having that production in a more local controlled environment also has the ability to reduce food waste, provide consumers with fresher and perhaps more personalized options. So again, going back to that kind of mass to micro, how do you actually execute that? And that could be a mechanism of being able to execute on that, on that capability. And so moving production closer to customers can enable more, more of that customization, while also having those other benefits. And I don't know that it necessarily has to be a store per se, but it's more kind of decoupling it closer to the consumer.
I just thought that was interesting because it's an interesting idea, and if it was 15% or 20% of executives, I would have thought okay, but 4 in 10. And you're talking about some massive retailers. That was interesting. That's a real change in how the stores operate, the stores look, or even if it's a regional operation where they've got, 20 stores within a geographic area, and they're going to set up a farm or whatever they're going to do, or, set up a mini production area for what could be private label products. Who knows? But I just thought that number was such a big number to me, for an idea that nobody's even talked about publicly. I found that fascinating.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up the report, Adam, I just think this is a little bit of an overview thing. Based on these results and based on what seems to be a really different level of thinking by these executives, the grocery experience for consumers within a decade could be very different than it is today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I feel like I'm in my early 50s. I feel like the supermarket has been relatively the same, forever in my life, and it hasn't changed that much. But there could be some very significant changes forthcoming, so it'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely, I think it's extremely exciting. The report highlights a lot of different forces, and ultimately it's going to be up to the grocers and retailers to decide on what actions they're going to take based on those dynamics from the consumer, and for different retailers it's going to play out differently.